Hey everyone, we're going to be talking about preterite versus imperfect tonight. And what we have to do is learn how to make the decision of to use a preterite past tense verb or an imperfect past tense verb. Even though they're both past tenses, that doesn't mean that we can interchange them whenever we would like to. So the first thing we're going to do is review our grammar. And so first up are our regular verbs in the preterite tense. Here are the charts. So if you need to pause and stop and copy this down, please do so right now. Okay, next we're going to practice. And so we have el transformar, vosotros perder, and yo vivir. Pause the video and conjugate those using your regular endings, please. All right, so these are your answers. And we're going to continue on with the next set of preterite. That's up, and we have our irregular 5 verbs, and these are completely irregular and they do not get any accents. So ir and ser, remember, they share the same conjugation chart. You know by context whether you're talking about someone who went somewhere or was or were somewhere. Then we have hacer, and remember that in the él, ella, usted form, we have a Z to contend with. The C changes to a Z so that we can maintain our S sound. If you need to pause to finish copying this down, please do so right now. If not, we can continue. Next up are the rest of the irregular 5. We have dar and ver. And you'll notice that they have the exact same conjugation endings. The only thing that is different is their first letter. Obviously, dar gets a D and ver gets a V. So pause if you need to so you can copy these down. If you have all of this in your flip book and you do not wish to, that's on you. I suggest for this lesson that you have it copied down on your note sheet. You'll see it's set up with 2 columns. And it's very neatly put there for you to have it all together. So I would do that. I'm going to give you some practice. So here we go. You gave, they did, we went. So instead of giving you the Spanish, we're giving you the English. Please pause and fill it in. All right, let's see what our answers are. Diste, hicieron, and fuimos. Okay, let's continue. And we're going to be working with stem changers. What are the stem changer rules in the preterite tense? This is fairly recent that we've worked on this. The first thing you need to remember is you have to ask yourself, does it stem change in the present tense? If the answer is yes, then the next thing you ask yourself is it an IR verb that stem changes in the present tense? Only IR verbs that stem change in the present tense will stem change in the preterite tense. And remember, we only stem change in the él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, ustedes. And so it should look like this when you picture a visual, and we call that our flip-flop or our chancla. So you should remember that visual. Okay, moving on. We're going to work with our 2 stem changers, O to U and E to I. And here's some practice. So if you need to pause, please do so. Okay, so she died, I preferred, and they completed. These are the infinitives that you need to work with: morir, preferir, and competir, if you did not remember that. Also remember that when you're trying to figure out what stem changes, because in number 2 and number 3 you have 2 E's, you have an O and an E to contend with. You always start at the end of the infinitive and work your way back 1, and that's how you know what vowel is going to stem change. So your answers should look like this. Ella murió, yo preferí, because preferí is the yo form, we do not stem change, and ellos compitieron. Okay, moving forward. All right, we have funky stems. This was the last thing that we did with the preterite before we started imperfect, and we need to list them out again. So here they are. So you're going to want to, in a second, pause and copy this down. If you don't have it memorized, please start memorizing it because you're going to need to know it. Okay, our last chart here is going to be your conjugation chart. So the reason why they're funky is not only is the stem all funky, but the conjugation is funky as well. And like our irregular 5 verbs, ir, ser, dar, aser, and ver, these also do not get accents. So please make a note of that next to your chart if you need to remind yourself. So if you want, pause now. All right, here's some practica for you. You all formal had, they put, and I could. So pause and copy that. Okay, here we go. These are your answers. Tuvieron, pusieron, and pude. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to review our imperfecto. This is what we just got quizzed over. And our regular verbs. It's wonderful that they're regular because almost every single verb in the imperfect is regular. So to the left you have your AR endings and to the right you have your ER, IR. They share their conjugations. Be mindful for the AR that it is the nosotros form that gets the accent on that first A, not the vosotros form. And then the ER, IR, all of those first I's or I get the accent. So if you get confused with the vosotros form, make sure that when you're writing your chart out, all your I's and the accents line up. If your I's are not lining up, that means that you have the accent in the wrong I. Okay, if you need to pause, and you can copy this down. Okay, so here we go. Practica for you. We have used to fight, was crying, and used to live. And just to remind you, that's how we translate that into English, the imperfect tense. Those are the 2 common ways of doing that. Depending on what you're trying to say when you're translating, you just choose which one works best. Okay, pause and try and conjugate that. All right, let's see what our answers are. Peleaban, lloraba, and vivían. Okay, moving on. What we're going to work with now are the irregulars, and there are only 3 of them. It's wonderful. We have ir, ser, and ver. So copy these down so you have them. Ir and ser have the same accent rules. The nosotros form gets the accent, and ver follows the regular er, ir endings. And so every I or first I is going to get an accent. So pause here if you need to. Okay, let's see what's up next. And so here's your practica. He used to go, it used to be, we were seeing. Pause and try and conjugate those on your own. Let's see. Iba, a, because when we go somewhere, there's always an a after the ear. Era and veíamos. Okay, moving on. This is the part that you really need to start paying attention to. It's going to be on the back side of your paper. It's also in columns, and the preterite again is on the left and the imperfect is on the right. The general idea of when to use the preterite. Okay, this is a really good visual for you guys to think about a stop sign, because it's an action that you know started and ended at a definite time in the past. And so if you think of a stop sign, that means, you know, when you're driving, everybody has to come to a complete stop, and that action ended from driving, right? You came to a complete stop. So if you think about it that way, that's what preterite is. You have an action that happened and it ended. All right. When we translate that into English, we think of verbs that end in ed or their irregular counterparts. We know that it's a specific action or main event action, and so that's what you're talking about that's important in your sentence. And then we also have some examples here to help you. So when I say yo corrí ayer, that's a completed action, and we know when it started and ended yesterday. I ran yesterday. Los guerreros pelearon en la pantalla durante la guerra en 500 AD. That's a main event. So when you're talking about history and you are either writing or reading a paragraph, you'll notice that this is in the preterite because it's the main event in that sentence or paragraph. And so we know that it happened and it ended. The warriors fought, which I spelled wrong, I just realized, in the battle during the war of 500 AD. We also have anoche nosotros dormimos a las 10. This is a specific action, and we also know exactly when it happened because we are given the time a las 10. We fell asleep at 10 o'clock. And so when we say at a specific time when something happens, we always know that's going to be the preterite. So this is a lot. I want you to pause and I want you to copy these down because they're good basic examples of when to use the preterite. All right, let's move on. And we're going to talk about the imperfect now. The imperfect, you should think of a bouncing ball because like in this image, you see that it goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down, it goes up, it comes down. So what we're talking about in the imperfect is there's an action that happened in the past and we don't know exactly when it began or when it ended. It can also be something that's very continuous and ongoing in the past. And so it's important for you to realize we don't really know anything specific about when it began or when it ended. Here you'll see a list, and some of them you've been given already. You've been given age and you've been given time when we did imperfect notes previously when we introduced the conjugations to you. We also talked about how verbs are wasing or wereing verbs, or how you used to do something in the past. What we're adding is descriptions. When you try and describe how someone felt or how someone's personality was or what they used to look like, we always use the imperfect tense. We also always use the imperfect tense when we give a date in the past and when we describe the weather. The weather is kind of a subcategory of descriptions. Okay, so if you need to pause and make sure you get all of this written down. Okay, let's move on and look at when to use the imperfect. So here are some examples. Yo tenía 20 años, we're talking about age. Ella era tímida, that's she was shy, that's an example of somebody's personality, so it's description. Nosotros peleábamos, we used to fight. Okay, if you need to pause and copy, please do so. All right, so the last thing that we need to go over, and we will work more with this in class because it can be kind of confusing, are overlapping actions. And so what you're going to see here, it says ongoing action and specific sudden action. So the black horizontal line represents an ongoing action, meaning that somebody is doing something ongoing in the past, in imperfect tense conjugation. And then all of a sudden, you see this purple line appear. That's all of a sudden, while somebody's doing something, somebody else performs an action. So this is what we're talking about. I was doing my homework when the phone rang. So you have to get this vision of sitting at your desk, sitting at the kitchen table, doing your work, that's your ongoing action, and then all of a sudden, ring, the phone rang. That's your preterite. So here we go. See what it looks like. Hacía mi tarea cuando el teléfono sonó. Another one would be when the war ended, Santa Anna was president. We have cuando la guerra terminó, Santa Anna era presidente. This is just written opposite as the top one. But really what we're saying here is that while Santa Anna was president, that's the ongoing action. That's why it's in the imperfect. Santa Anna era presidente. That's when the war ended. La guerra terminó. But we wanted to say when the war ended, Santa Anna was president. Cuando la guerra terminó, Santa Anna era presidente. So if you need to,